Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and I wanted to introduce you to someone new to our team, relatively new. This is Gunther Kirsch. Gunther is a video producer on our team, works alongside Joey to produce our videos. You edit, what do you edit on, Gunther?
I edit on a Mac, a 2011 Mac, trash can.
You don't have to apologize for that, because when we set Gunther up with a computer, a workstation in our office, it was a Mac trash can. But you actually edit on a PC at home.
I edit on a PC at home. I play games on a PC at home. I learn computers on a PC, so that is my natural habitat. And today we're going to be building a PC. So we thought it was about time. It's been a while since we've built and put together a new PC. We've built gaming PCs in the past, VR-ready PCs, but we want to build a PC specifically for video editing. And because the components up in the PC space actually make it much more competitive and interesting for that purpose for desktop computing. Especially at the price, too.
Yes, absolutely. So what we'll be doing today is building and testing an AMD-based PC using their new Ryzen architecture. They announced and launched that around March of this year. So our friends over at AMD did supply us with this processor. This is a Ryzen 1700X in the Ryzen line on the high end, 8-core CPUs, all unlocked. You can overclock them. There's the 1800X, the 1700X in the middle, and also the 1700. Prices have actually gone down. A street price for a 1700X is about $320, $330 right now, even though it launched at about $400 just a couple months ago.
I'm considering building a new home PC as well, and the Ryzen is
probably
going to be the choice.
Cores,
yes.
Right? 8 cores, 16 threads. On the Intel side, it's getting competitive because previously their E-class processors were...
Those were always the high-core ones.
Yeah, and those
were very, very expensive.
Very expensive, almost $1,000. So right now, it's really interesting that you can get for around $300, $350 an 8-core desktop processor for encoding, for video editing. Let's run through the components real quick before we dive into the build. Along with this processor, we also have an AMD cooler. This actually doesn't come with the processor. If you buy it on Amazon, you have to buy it separately. It's like $30 to $40.
It's called the AMD Wraith, right?
It is. Yeah, it's their Wraith. It's a little different design. This Ryzen CPU works with their new AM4 architecture, their socket, 1331 pins, I believe, which works on this motherboard. It's the X370 chipset. This one is just made by MSI. They have a whole line of them. You don't have to use this motherboard. I got this one because they say they have the VR specific features to reduce the latency on those USB ports.
Which we might be using this for after
Which we might also be using as well. But you can buy bundles between the processor and X370 motherboards as well. We're sticking with AMD for this build, so we're testing as well a Radeon RX 580. This is about the equivalent of a GeForce 1060. So it's about a $300, $350 video card. This is the 8GB model. It's a little tough to find these days. Do you know why, Gunther?
No, I do not.
A lot of people are buying them to do mining for Bitcoin and digital currency, cryptocurrency mining. But if you can find one, I'm interested in testing this because it is right in that mid-range pricing.
That should be perfectly suitable for our needs too here. We don't do a lot of animations or anything like that. So.
And then with this new processor also is the first that supports DDR4 memory on the AMD side. So we have some Corsair reliable 16 gigabytes of memory. We'll also be seeing if 16 gigs is enough for your video editing purposes. If not, we can always spend extra $100, $150 to bump that up to 32 gigabytes. And then finally, very standard components. We have our case. We like this case.
Beautiful case.
Yeah, beautiful Corsair case. We have a very standard Enermax modular power supply.
750?
750 watt. And then in terms of storage, we're going to be using, have you built a PCIe storage device, base PC before?
No. I haven't. This is my first time.
Yeah, so this is from Samsung, and this is an NVMe SSD. It's basically a stick that plugs into the motherboard, and it uses a PCIe lane. And so because you'll be video editing.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully this will be
better than an SSD.
Awesome as well. So let's switch to an overhead camera and get to building. Okay, Gunther, this is like our operating room view of this whole operation. And we're going to start off with the cavity of the case. We've already removed the side panel of this Corsair case, and we've done a little bit, just a very bit of pre-preparation. Looking in, this is a pretty well-reviewed case. It has a ton of these ports for cards here, a big open slot here for the back, for a backing plate, for your motherboard, and a ton of wiring options, but it's a very, very standard mid-tower case. If you flip to the other side of the case, you start to see some of its more unique features. And you can notice that you have your storage bays here for your drives, as well as your 3.5-inch, oh, that whole thing fell off. It's because we actually unscrewed that. As well as plenty of spaces here for SSDs if you want to slot them in the back. And everything seems to be pretty modular. So this whole, we can actually remove this if we wanted to unscrew, but we're going to leave that in. It's not a problem.
Got a nice fan controller built in.
Yeah, fan controller, light controller.
RGB.
Yeah, RGB right there. And a bunch of headers to plug in. And then even SATA power that's even pre-routed. One of the things I hate doing on cases is plugging in my drives, and then sometimes the SATA cables you get with your motherboards aren't necessarily the best to wire, not long enough, or you have to fold them in certain ways. And so having this is actually really nice. A little distribution right there.
I like it.
So the other thing we actually pre-prepped is this is loose because we unscrewed that bay here. We're not going to be using these bays for drives. And those are just thumb screws, right?
Just thumb screws.
Thumb screws that we just unscrewed right here. And so that's going to stay in place as we flip this case back around. And you can remove that cage. And so here we're looking at the cavity back in of the case. The other thing we did a little bit of pre-preparation is remove these shrouds. So that's where the power supply will go. And the case actually comes in with 2 of these shrouds in place for airflow, but you need to remove those first. Same thing with thumb screws on the other side, and that will allow us to do our very first step, which is to install the PSU, the power supply. So I'm going to have you grab that. This is, yep, our 750 watt power supply. Now, for the power supply, step one, you notice there's a big fan in the power supply. We're going to want to face that down because that's where that's going to funnel the air. And really, it's a very standard ATX power supply. That's going to push in against there. And we're going to find the screws that came with our, not with our case, but the screws that came in with the power supply, because that's what's going to work with these threaded thread inserts, and that's right here. And so I'll have you screw those in very simply. This is a mostly modular power supply, so we have, I don't think we're going to use much more than what's already attached here. Now, to build this PC, all we really need is like 1 screwdriver, essentially, 1 Phillips head.
They made it really easy on us too. There's already standoffs built into the case, which is really handy.
Right there.
So that can be a pain to do.
And I'm just going to help you refocus just a little bit. There we go. We don't need to change it too much from there. And I'll show you, while you do that, I'm going to show the people out there exactly what's in this PSU. So you, of course, you have your ATX power supply. This, with all these pins, is what plugs into the motherboard, providing most of its power. What additionally goes into the motherboard will be a CPU plug, and that should typically be labeled CPU. I think that is actually this one right here, or this one. One of those is for the CPU.
It's a 4-pin and a...
Yeah, they have an 8-pin and a pair of 4 pins. And we're going to do a little bit of pre-prep work tidying up. These are your headers that will connect the motherboard to the case for the power switch, the reset switch, and unfortunately for this particular motherboard, I do not think we have any header adapters on the MSI motherboard. On some other motherboards I've used, you actually can plug in an adapter that will connect.
Right, it's like a little cheat block.
Yep.
Yeah, I have one of those on mine. We'll have to look in the manual.
Yeah, so we'll just reference the manual. Other headers from the case that we need to put aside include the USB 3. The worst cable, I think, inside a system is this USB.
They always pop out.
USB-C. It's just super rigid, doesn't work really well. Well, it works, it's just a hassle to work around. But I think we're okay. How tight is this PSU in?
They're pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay. Next step, we're gonna get the motherboard in here, and we're gonna wanna put this faceplate on.
I have made the mistake of not doing that and then had to take my complete system apart.
Yeah, so every motherboard has its own faceplate. This is where all the I/O ports come out of the back. Your headphones, your USB, your external drives, some HDMI, maybe Ethernet as well. And some cases have one built in, and we would need to pop that out. This one is just blank, and so have it oriented. You always go in from inside out, and it's pretty clear. I think it's just going to be this way. Yep. And you want to make sure they are popped all four corners. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is flush.
Yep.
Very nice.
Perfect.
I'm going to tilt it up just a little bit to show you guys out there. That's going to be flush. Now, another tricky thing is right here. These, I find always a hassle. They get stuck in the ports almost. I'm going to push those out just a little bit. Yeah, right there. And we can actually pop those off. You don't really need those. All right, let's get to the motherboard. So here we have our motherboard, and we're gonna do a quick test fit.
Definitely do the test.
Now, like you said, the standee is already built in. So with some of the old cases, you have to screw in the standees manually, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 9, the nightstand here actually is just a fixed piece of plastic. It's almost an alignment standee, but there will be a hole in your motherboard for that. So we're gonna align that properly.
Yep.
Right there.
That standoff is in.
Notice I went in from this direction because the important thing is to have these ports match up. And you can do a quick sanity check to make sure they are matched up. What we're not going to do right now, though, is screw in the motherboard. The standees and actually this peg here keeps it pretty firm already. Like, it's not a lot of wiggle room, which is it's nice because we want to make sure that we get the CPU and the cooler on, and we don't have to take the motherboard off in case. So it's a little bit tricky. I'm actually going to take the motherboard off one more time to show you the back of the motherboard. It's pretty firm in there. There it goes. Now, the back of the motherboard has this black plate right there. And this plate has 4 screws into it. It's actually what holds this bracket in place. Some CPU coolers will just snap on and clip on to these brackets. We're actually not going to be using these brackets because the Wraithspire AMD CPU cooler we have just has the 4 screws themselves, and we're going to be replacing it and screwing that in. So that's our next step, is to prep the CPU cooler. But your mileage may vary. We haven't tested that Wraith cooler thoroughly yet, so we can't say that's going to be the best air cooler. And of course, if you want to do like a water cooling system, you'll be plugging something different in. But we're going to take our screwdriver and remove that. Let's see. Simple. And that back plate that I talked about earlier, it shouldn't fall down because it should have some adhesive that will attach it to the back, affix it to the back. But there's always a chance that it will fall down, in which case we'll have to have you hold that from the back. All right, Gunther, why don't you unscrew the rest of that? And see that just popped off? This popped off, no problem. We'll of course save all these pieces in case you're gonna use a different cooler for the future. And this is from that back plate. I'm not gonna push on it too hard, but you can tell that it's not falling down because it is stuck to the bottom. So Gunther, while you are unscrewing those last 2 pieces, I'm gonna talk a little bit about this CPU. This is the Ryzen 1700X on the 8-core Ryzen Zen architecture CPUs. This is like the mid-range. There's the 1800X, the 1700X, as well as the 1700. And the X isn't, the 1700 and 1700X are actually more different. It's not just like a K processor on the Intel side. These are all actually unlocked. What's different is the TDP, and the clock speed. Did it actually pop off? Yeah, it did pop down. So not enough adhesive. The difference between the 1700X and the 1800X is clock speed. So it's about 200 megahertz slower on the 1700X, but because these are unlocked, these are very overclockable, and people have been able to get them up to about 4 gigahertz without much problem. All right, so we'll lift it up, and we'll have you push that in. Now this is gonna be tricky because, see if you can get that there.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna have you hold that.
That's fine.
While I screw in the CPU, or the CPU cooler. But first, I'm gonna put in the CPU. So let's set this motherboard and case back down, and we'll
do that
install the CPU really quickly. Okay, so I'm being very careful with the CPU. This motherboard's a little different than an Intel board. I mean, CPUs look very similar these days. There's not much difference in them. You have all your pins in the back. In this case, 1,331 pins, a shield on top if you want to put a heat spreader, that if you want to put some thermal paste on top. And this had no covering. Some motherboards do have a shield here that you remove, and you want to keep that if you ever want to RMA your motherboard. But most motherboards have this lock that you pull up. It's very simple. You just unhook it from the side. I'll do that very simply again, and pull that up. And then there is a arrow on the corner of the CPU. I'm gonna adjust, I know it's very reflective, but there's no arrow on this side. And if you're looking at the Ryzen logo on an AMD CPU, the arrow is gonna be on your bottom left. But I'm oriented upside down, so it's gonna be top right to me. And you can see there's an arrow, very tiny arrow right there on that corner. And to install the CPU, it really is a matter of just dropping it down, and that's it. And then I'm gonna put this pin back down. You get a little bit of resistance, not much at all, and you'll feel the whole thing shift, and the CPU is now in place. Now we're gonna put the cooler on. Now this cooler that came with this case actually already has a thermal pad on there. If we were to remove this, or use a new cooler, you never want to reuse the thermal paste. You'd be removing this, you wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol, same as the top of the heat shield here, and then apply thoroughly a very thin layer of thermal paste on top. So let's have you hold, it's gonna be a little bit tricky. This can be aligned one of two ways. It can be aligned this way, or this way. And it really is up to you because
CPU fan header, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a CPU fan connector here, and that is actually on their motherboard. It's a 4-pin system fan. They're all written system fan. It should be right by. It's right there.
So it's in the top.
Yeah. So it can actually go like that. I think that's a pretty fair way to do it because you have your text here that way and your text here that way. So I'm gonna.
Very aesthetic.
Yep, I'm gonna drop this in.
Yep, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, now this is, it's gonna be a little bit of I'll have you hold it. It's gonna be a little bit of pressure. I know we're doing an angle. Another way you can do this obviously is to put the whole case up on some blocks, piece of wood, and then hold it. But we're doing it at a little bit of an angle. And it should be pretty easy. You do a half turn on one side, wanna make sure it catches. Do a little more turn on this side. You put a little bit of force down. You feel, make sure that's catching.
Seems to be holding.
And then I'm gonna go the other sides as well. Yeah, I can see them bending. Yeah, how many PCs have you worked on, Gunther?
Just 2. My 7-year-old PC at this point, and then a friend's that I helped build. But I've had to rebuild mine, unfortunately, like
a couple times.
You know, just troubleshooting parts going bad, things like that. recently it was actually my motherboard turned out to be the issue, and I went through a whole series of troubleshooting steps, removing power supply, graphics card, CPU, all of it.
Yeah, I think the part that people find the most stressful is applying the CPU fan. They didn't make it easy back in the day. And on the Intel side, some of their built-in CPU coolers, you just turn it, literally plug it in, it either snaps in place and you turn it the half step. Here, it's not that bad at all. It's just 4 screws. They're going to be the right length. I'm actually supporting the back plate each corner. So
Smart.
I'm giving that, making sure it reaches up there.
The board too much.
Yeah, or at all.
Yeah.
That's tight. Yeah, this is made pretty easily. You know when you've reached the tight point, it just stops turning. Great. And our fourth one. Almost there. It's a little bit more. Oh, maybe it's not catching as much as oh, there it goes.
Perfect.
Catch, there it goes. Okay, one more check. That is tight, it's not turning anymore. Tight. Yeah, it used to be we were very afraid of cracking that heat spreader and doing permanent damage to the CPU, but that is fixed in place.
Just gonna put this in now before we forget.
Yep. That only goes, it's keyed, so it only goes in one way. I want to move your head a little bit so we can actually see. And there it goes. So that's a CPU and the cooler installed. I don't know if this version of the cooler has lights, but some versions of this Wraithspire cooler do have lights, and they'll have an additional port that you can plug into the lighting system on your case. I don't think this one does. I didn't see any additional cables, so we are all right. And I love this peg here on
yeah,
motherboard.
That's really handy.
Yeah, because nothing's shifting, it's all locked in place.
Just kind of float.
Yeah. We're going to install the RAM next, and then we're going to screw in the motherboard. So we have 2 sticks of RAM, and usually you can buy RAM in pairs of 2. These are 2 8GB sticks, which gives us 16 gigs of RAM, but also room to upgrade. And the tricky thing for RAM is when you're installing them in pairs is which of the pairs you want which of the slots, which of the 2 slots. Every motherboard is a little different. Some motherboards are color-coded. This one is not, so this is definitely a case where you're going to want to reference the manual and figure out which of the 2 you want to plug in. So we did reference the manual, and it said to plug into slot A2 and B2 if you're using just 2. And I think those are actually written
somewhere
on the side
here we go.
somewhere.
There's
yep.
little...
So, and actually, it's nice because it's screen printed right onto the motherboard, and it says DIMM A1, A2, B1, and B2, and there's a little identifier that says install A2 and B2 first. So it's even right on the motherboard. And so this is A2 and B2. I'm going to pop those open. Some motherboards only allow you to pop it open from one side.
Yep.
That is totally okay. And we're going to grab our DIMMs. And this is the only place you can potentially really screw this up, is that there's a notch right in the middle here. It's not exactly in the center. I'm going to make sure that the notch fits the notch on the motherboard as well. So you plug in the DIMMs, and you will be able to hear a click if you push it in on both sides. Just make sure, push it in. You don't need to push in too hard. The sides will pop up and lock it in place, and that is installed. It's like one of the easiest things.
Yeah.
Right? When you're watching a sci-fi film and Data is swapping isolinear chips in Star Trek, it's like this is essentially that.
It's nerve-wracking, but pretty hard to screw up.
Yeah. There it goes. Pop it in. Very nice. And of course, if we were to upgrade, we'd also want to upgrade not just with another 16 gig in one stick. We'd want 2 8 gigs and run this dual channel and install and max that out. Cool. So now is a good time for us to actually screw the motherboard in. And so we have this little bag of screws. This one did come with the case because the standoffs and these screws come in the case. So I'm gonna pour these out on a table and we can tag team this. Do we have another screwdriver? Yes, we do, with 2 screwdrivers. Perfect. And we're just gonna
block the camera.
Yeah, we're gonna just get all of those in real quickly into those standoffs. You don't need to go very tight into them, but once you get all 9 of those in, or I think 8 in this case, the motherboard's gonna be pretty rock solid. Yeah, if you try to go too tight, you risk damaging the motherboard, cracking the motherboard just a little bit. I've never seen anyone actually do it, but it's just something I always get paranoid about.
You can also strip these, which is never fun.
Yeah, you don't want to strip them either. I like using hand tools.
Oh yeah.
I know people have really nice power tools. It makes it a little bit faster. But you want, magnetic screwdriver. You know, something from iFixit.
Should have had that cold brew. I'm a little shaky. Too much caffeine. You're powering through it. I've only done 2.
Oh, I think
We got one more up there. Want to get that one?
Oh, I see it. Yep, top corner. Yeah. I used to race building PCs. Do you know that?
That's what you guys did on Friday nights at... What magazine did you work for?
Maximum PC Magazine.
There we go.
All right. So motherboard is totally solid. I wouldn't lift it by it, but it's not going anywhere. The motherboard looks scary. It's really not that scary. We're not going to use a ton of these, but there is like an order of operations for things. Like for example, when I showed you the ATX power supply and the CPU power plugs, that will go here and alongside here. And actually, that's perfect. This is a 12 volt, and we use one of these 4 pins and one of these 8 pins to plug here. What that also means is that I currently do not have power for GPUs, and that's where you have these hard drives, SATA power and PCIe powers on the side here, which we have plenty of cables. So I'm gonna have you open that up. We're not actually gonna use that in a little while.
Okay.
Wow, there's PCIe power there as well. Let's plug in something that's interesting. We're gonna plug in our storage.
Yeah, and that's important to do before the graphics card, obviously, because in this case, the graphics card would most likely block that shield.
Mm-hmm. So the storage drive that we have for this build is a PCIe stick. It's an NVMe SSD. Samsung makes this one. I actually don't know if this is a SATA controller or using a PCIe controller. The PCIe ones are much faster, but I think at this point, they're all PCIe these days. Yep.
Perfect.
This goes, it's top.
It looks like we might need to move this standoff into a different position.
Let's see.
Yeah, I think, the standoff needs to be there.
Yep, that's no problem.
Yep.
It's real easy to do with a screwdriver.
There you go.
The first time I built a PC, I need a tinier screwdriver. First time I built a PC with this type of
Flathead?
Flathead might be better. Yeah. With this type of storage, it was actually on the back of the motherboard. It wasn't even prominent.
Oh, right. There we go.
Nice. Oh, there it goes. Wow, that's a really tiny standoff.
Just enough.
Wow. It's like maybe 2 millimeter of threading there.
Thanks.
Jeez. All right, I'll plug that in. And so because we're using, this is 512 gigs, because we're using this stick, we're not going to need to, we can install more SSDs and more drives later, but for the purpose of this build, we're going to start off with 512 gigs. They are keyed. There's a small set of pins and a larger set of pins, and so you can really only go in that one way.
Sticks up a little bit.
Yep, and then we're going to grab that. Yeah, so that's totally okay right now. See how it's kind of stuck at an angle and floating? That is totally okay. When we close it, What do you think? Use the shield?
Yeah, looks
Yeah.
nifty.
Use the shield, and then we'll put that in, put that, that screw back in to the standee, the standoff.
I like standee better. I never called it that. It's good.
Another difference, I mean, there are many differences, of course, between the Ryzen CPUs and the Intel CPUs. On the very high end, you know, the E-class CPUs on the Intel side, the ones we talked about being almost $1,000, they have a ton of PCIe lanes, I think like 40 PCIe lanes. Here it's a little bit less than that, but we're not using dual video cards in this build, and I think this will just be fine, even if we're using the PCIe storage with the one video card. But of course, you have plenty of PCIe devices if you want to plug in, including.
Wrong screw.
Oh, did I?
Oh, there we go.
Yes, this
There
is
it
the one. Here we go. Including your Thunderbolts, your extra USBs. But our build is going to be a little simple. But we have those expandability options, especially since you're going to be using this for video editing.
Yeah. We even have another slot here for another
Yeah.
PCIe card.
Exactly. NVMe. Yep. A small PCIe stick.
Sweet.
Cool. So that's it for storage. That's like the easiest
So
storage.
simple now.
I know.
No cables.
Yeah. I mean, we could, if we
could.
wanted to,
Yeah.
plug it in, get a small 3.5-inch drive, plug it in, no problem. But let's put in the video card now.
Do it.
And while I grab the video card, yeah, you went right to it, perfect. You're gonna grab a PCIe power cable.
Pretty sure this is it. Is that
Yeah,
right?
there should be a set, two sets of 8.
Yep, these little guys hanging off.
So this is a gigabyte card. And very simple. Looking forward to testing this as well. This one you can tell uses one 8-pin at the top for power. There are cards these days, entry-level cards that don't even need power plugged into the top, PCIe power. They get it all through the PCIe slot. This one you do need one from the top. That will be very simple to plug in. And you're already going right for it. We're going to remove 2 of these plates in the back. Thumb screws are so useful. We're going to keep those thumb screws.
And the plates too.
And the plates. Oh, ha! We did the thing that I always do, is we chose the wrong 2 plates. That's okay. We just got to remove one more and then replace
Put them back in.
that one back in. Yeah.
Top one.
Yes. All right. Let's pop out that plate. No problem.
It's a big card.
I know. I mean, it's a good sized card. It's not massive. You know, back a couple of years ago, we had cards that were literally a foot long. Yeah, and this is, and even on the AMD side, plenty that were like literally foot longs. And this, I think it's like, I don't know, 10
Yeah,
inches,
8 to 10
10.5 inches.
Looks pretty good over here.
Okay.
We press the tab down before we put it in,
Yep.
and it snaps up.
Great.
Perfect.
So let me actually do that again and show you guys, and we'll refocus just a little bit to show the motherboard. I gotta push this tab. Oop.
Yeah, those are really tucked in there sometimes.
Yeah.
I've had to use screwdrivers before. There we go.
So this is what I wanted to show you. On these big PCIe lanes, you do have this tab. Now, if you push that down an angle, that's fine. When you push it in, it will pop in, almost just like the memory. And when you want to remove the card, you need to unlock it by pushing this down again. So open that up. And sometimes you're going to find that the metal here gets stuck, or it's tough to cram it between the case and the motherboard. And that probably means that your motherboard is not aligned well. There's a little bit of wiggle room, so you want to push the motherboard just a little bit away from these edges here to get some clearance. We didn't have any problems
Yeah, went right in.
with that. I'm just going to make sure to align everything right. again, saw that pop. I'm gonna make sure, push it there. So Gunther, while you screw in the CPU, the GPU, I'm gonna plug in then the power cable.
Yeah, semi-modular power supplies are totally fine because you're always going to need motherboard supply and CPU supply.
Yeah, I don't know what people were thinking. I think there was like a patent a company had on modular power supplies, and it doesn't make any sense to me why the first modular power supplies had modular ATX.
Yeah. Yeah, I currently have one at my house. It's a Sonic.
Okay, so I'm gonna start plugging in power. So right now we have 6-pin, 2-pin, of course equals 8-pin. They are again keyed in one direction, and that's because this clip here clips onto the outside there. They will only go in one way. They're all different, a little bit different shapes as well. So I'm gonna plug that in, and
then for the motherboard and CPU power supply, we can even route it behind potentially.
yeah, I like to do those last.
If we can fit it up there.
All right, so we have our graphics card, we have our CPU, we have our RAM, we have our storage. Let me think, what is there really left to do?
It's at the point where we got to double check our work.
Yeah, before I plug in power.
Yeah.
So here's what I think I'm gonna do, is that now I'm gonna start plugging in these headers. Because we're getting really close. This is, of course, when I talk about that USB 3.0 header from the front, and it goes into right there. Usually it's either along the bottom here. I'll move it into a little bit better lighting. Along the bottom here or right here, it is keyed as well. So I'm gonna try to be neat about it and plug that in. There it goes. So you have USB in the front. Now along the side here, you have a lot of these SATA cables. And if we wanted to do the work, we could plug in some SATA cables and route them back just to make it really easy.
Make it easy in the future.
To upgrade and install additional drives. The motherboard does give you a preference if you're just using SATA drives of which of these ports you want to have your boot drive off of, and it's usually split off to the side. But we're not doing that, and that will be fine. So I'm gonna grab my headers here.
Luckily, our motherboard comes with a nice cheat sheet here.
Yeah. Oh, for where the headers go?
Where the headers go.
Great. Yeah, you'd think that after decades of PC building, they'd come up with a better solution than this, but nope.
It's part of the fun. It makes you have to do a little more work.
Yeah,
it's
more
technical.
The satisfaction. Yeah. So these are, I'm going to put them over here. You have HD audio. You have two individual ones for power lights. You have your ground, your positive, your negative, and you have your power switch, and you have your reset switch. Yeah, so let's see. The speaker one is the easiest. Onboard sound cards are totally fine these days. And they're 9 pins, and even though there's room for 10 pins here, actually, I'm going to show you. One is always blocked off, which helps you align which one to plug in. So there are 2 spots. That says USB. USB, I believe audio is. Is it right?
Is it that guy?
Let me see. Speaker.
I think it's
HD
this one
audio.
Here. Is that it? You see that?
Let's see.
No, I'm wrong. Oh. That?
Really quick. Let's see. Speakers. No, this is actually.
Oh.
See if you can find. It might be there. There. Ah. It's right there.
There it is.
Front panel audio connector.
Yep.
Right there.
Even with the cheat sheet, it took a little work.
Yeah, I'm gonna move this a little bit so you can see right into the case. Yeah. PC cases are like little black holes of, they absorb all light.
I'm managing to do pretty good here.
Yeah. Okay, I am missing a speaker, the beep. I'm sure I'll turn up. Okay, I'm gonna need your help a little bit, Gunther. So let's start with reset switch.
Reset switch is 2 right here of this connector, I believe.
I see.
So on the right side, it's 2,
There it goes.
perfect.
And then let's go, power switch is
Just opposing that.
just opposing that. Great. Fantastic. And then power LEDs.
Right here, that's just above the power switch.
Yep. In this case, all the text that's on these headers are facing outward, and that's typically how it is for aligning your positive and negative. There it goes. A little bit of surgery. Okay, now are we missing a speaker cable, or is there not one?
I see a tiny little cable here. What's that going to?
Ah, that's not speaker. Oh, we have hard drive LED as well.
Oh, look at that.
All right, let's plug that in first. Yes. So.
That is opposing the power LED.
Perfect. 8 very important pins plugged in. Our next set of 3 are actually the fans now. So there are 3 fans.
3 chassis fans.
On the top, and there should be plenty of spots on this motherboard to put case fans, system fans. So actually I'm gonna keep these tied up because
they can reach.
Yeah. That's a little bit. First one. Right there. Yep, system fan 4 right there. Go get that around. And then third one, another one right there.
Cool.
I'm gonna untangle this tie just to get a little bit of more length here. This is gonna be the most tidiest PC build we've done, but that can happen off camera.
Yeah.
Very nice. These are all, of course, keyed again. They only go in the one way. And I think we might be ready to plug in some power to the system.
Yeah.
So we have a big ATX power. I saved this guy for last. This big one for last. And so I'm gonna put the CPU power on. And this one sometimes has to stretch on top of a, right. Maybe wire that around this way. They are also keyed. There goes 4. Nope, didn't hear the click. There it goes, very tiny click. Great. And then only one set of these will need to get plugged in for the other ones. Yeah, they can connect if you need to. 8 cores of power. I mean, let's talk a little bit about why you will want multiple cores, the things you do day to day in your video editing, Gunther.
Yeah, so we do a lot of encoding of really long projects. We're encoding daily, sometimes overnight. And having 8 cores with 16 threads is going to significantly reduce a lot of that rendering time. And that allows us to get test pieces out to people who need to see them before they go up on the channel. It just makes everything go quicker. And if you can spend a little extra money to get 8 cores, it'll help you out in the long run.
Yeah, and GPU does help with video editing. In Premiere, the GPU helps you get some effects, transition effects, analyze the scene for warp stabilizers. Those are all GPU enhanced. But in terms of just encoding H.264 or encoding in ProRes or
DNX HD.
Yep, that's all basically CPU gated.
CPU. And it's good to have the assist from the GPU because we use transitions and things like that. But majority of the encoding work comes from the CPU.
All right.
Should we get a power cable?
Yeah, I think that's it. We're going to quickly review all the parts just to do a little bit of just a sanity check. We opened up the case. We took out the shrouds, which we can, of course, put back in if we really wanted to. We also removed this drive cage because it got in the way of this cable. But again, if with some clever cable origami, if we really needed to, this could go back in, I believe. Power supply went in first. That was screwed in with the screws from the power supply. Then we put in the motherboard I/O shield, fitted the motherboard, removed the fan clip already, then dropped in the CPU, then put in this AMD fan. Then we put in the RAMs, 2 sticks of RAM.
Yep.
We screwed in the motherboard, then put in, it's hidden actually, our storage is underneath the graphics card, right there. Installed the graphics card, and then got power to all relevant systems and got in those motherboard headers. And that's really it. We used, because we're 2 people, we used 2 screwdrivers, a Phillips head and a flat head.
And just fancy Legos.
And it really is. Yeah, it's not that complicated. But the moment of truth is, of course, when we power this up. So let's go power it up.
Let's do it.
So here we are. It's a couple weeks later after the build, but we needed that time for you, Gunther, to actually use the computer.
Yep.
So this is interesting because right after we did this build, we went to Comic-Con, and
we took it with us.
And we took it with us. You drove down, had it set up in your hotel room. It was actually pretty amazing.
We had a little interesting configuration. The ironing board was my desk. The hotel TV was my monitor, and it worked out pretty good.
It worked out pretty great, actually. It's an event where we need to process a ton of video. That day. Lots of footage coming in, being edited.
Very quick turnaround.
Very quick turnaround, where we would previously have taken that trash can, that Mac Pro computer, and anecdotally, you found this to be better?
Oh, incredibly. Yeah, I wouldn't say twice as fast, but very close. It's a breeze. Encode times, you can just be so much more productive because you don't have to sit around waiting for your machine to finish the encode. You can power through edits like crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So typically when you're a video producer and editing, you're going to spend the day editing, and maybe if you're lucky, you encode overnight. You export your video, your multiple versions, time it overnight, and you can upload it in the morning. But here, I use the computer to edit an episode of Projections, and which is like a 30-minute long episode, and it was getting me an encode time of around 30 minutes or under, which is like a really good standard baseline benchmark. If it takes 1 minute for the computer to encode a 1 minute H.264 1080p video, which is about what we're finding with this.
Yeah, we just encoded a Alien Covenant incognito walk from Comic-Con. It's kind of one that we've been waiting for, and it was just about 1-to-1.
Awesome. Well. That's so cool. And the 8 cores are really paying off. The RAM actually also is helping in terms of that workflow.
Yes. We boosted the RAM to the stock clock speeds because when you first install it, I think it puts it around 2100 megahertz, and then we bumped it up to its advertised stock running speed, which is 32 megahertz, and that helps the CPU as well.
And it's actually on right now. It's a pretty quiet PC.
Oh, it's really quiet. It's really, really quiet. Actually, that's one satisfying thing about it. I don't hear it run at all. Yeah, it's very, very quiet.
So this is going to be our new production machine. We're editing videos off of this. It, of course, runs that AMD 1700X CPU. And in the time since we built this, this week, actually, AMD is releasing their Threadripper CPUs, which is the next step up. This is Ryzen. Threadripper goes up to 16 cores, but that is going to be a $1,000 CPU.
It's an expensive
Very
piece of
expensive
hardware.
CPU. You have a lot more PCI Express lanes, 64 PCIe lanes. Unfortunately, you can't move from Ryzen to Threadripper. You need a whole different chipset to support that.
It's a massive chunk of hardware. It's
I know.
basically two CPUs slapped together.
Yeah, and that's the 1900X
Yes.
and above line, 1950. This is the 1700X. You can get this CPU for around $300 now, which is a fantastic price for 8-core, 16-thread CPU if you're going to be processing video. If you're a YouTuber making video editing on Windows, it's something we can definitely recommend.
Yeah, if you're a professional in coding things, not just gaming, Ryzen's the way to go right now.
Awesome. Well, we'll have more PC builds in the future, other systems to review. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.